Hello, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. Today we're going to be testing out the new NARS Laguna Ultimate Face Palette. So they did just release two of these palettes. There is a light to medium and a medium to deep, and these retail for $59 US or 73 Canadian. This palette does have a 12-month shelf life and is made in Canada. So these palettes are now available on their website. I don't know if they're coming to Sephora. But at the same time as these palettes, they also released some Total Seduction eyeshadow sticks for $32 US or 41 Canadian. And they did release 8 different shades. I didn't purchase any of those because they were all mattes and I just didn't think I would get the most use out of them. But I was tempted to pick up the palette. This is what the inner packaging looks like. Very much a Laguna palette. Reminds me a lot of their quads from last year, from last summer's collection. Opening this up, we get 2 bronzers, a highlight, and 4 eyeshadows. So as I mentioned, this is the lighter of the two. So we get Laguna 02, Laguna 04, and the highlight is called Drift Away. I will, of course, pop in some swatches, and then you get those 4 eyeshadows across the top. I think this is a very pretty palette. Looking at it now, I feel like it's probably not the most unique color story from NARS. They don't typically release new and exciting color stories, but I do love to review the new releases from NARS because I do think their formulas are wonderful. So we are going to apply this palette both on the eyes and the cheeks, and then I will show you some comparisons. So I think I will start with the eyes because I do already have those primed with my Alter Ego primer and then just set with a little bit of powder. I think I'm just going to start with that more pinky shade here, this pinky matte. This is called Unwind. And I think this is going to be my crease shade. So I probably had the same thoughts as everybody else when I initially saw this palette was coming out. I was kind of excited. I'm always excited to see a new NARS launch, but I was kind of excited to see a new face palette. This looked really pretty, very sultry and fun for the summer. But then as I looked at it more, I just thought, this is literally the same thing they release all the time, perhaps in a different font. You know, we don't always get bronzers, which is fun. You know, typically we do get some sort of blush and highlight palette. This year we're getting bronzer and highlight, which is kind of a nice change, but I do think that just on first glance at the palette, perhaps they could have made 3, like a light, a medium, and a deep. And then instead of 2 bronzers, we could have had a blush. I just think that that would have made a little bit more sense. Also, this pink shade is really not coming off very pink. To me, it's pulling kind of brown, if anything, which I'm not mad at, but it doesn't really seem true to what's in that pan. But that's okay. Let me zoom you in. Okay, now you can see what I'm doing. Just doing the same thing on the other eye. Okay, so we are keeping it simple today. I do have somewhere to be later, so I do want this to come out really pretty. And as much as we complain about NARS releasing the same things over and over and over, which is completely valid, I can't deny that I love their eyeshadow formula. It's probably one of my very favorite formulas. It's just very smooth and silky and easy to work with. I love their mattes. I just feel like it's a very user-friendly formula. I feel like if you're someone who has more texture, maybe more mature lids, but just in general more texture, I feel like you'd get along with this formula very well. It's just very easy to blend. Like I said, very silky. They can be pigmented, but they're so easy to blend. And I'm just keeping this one in the crease and up a little bit higher than usual. Next, I'm just going to go into this shade right here. This is the shade Heat Spell, and this one is a satin as opposed to that matte. It has a bit more of a sheen to it. I'm just lightly going in, really not very much at all. And then I'm just going to use that to deepen the outer corner. I'm not 100% sure what I want to do with this look yet, but like I said, I'm just kind of keeping it simple. I'm just going to grab my crease brush and I'm just going to use that to blend that deeper shade. Same thing on the other side. So I'm not sure if these are coming to Sephora. I think their summer palettes usually do, But I also wanted to mention that they do usually release some sort of 6-pan blush palette for summer. So because of this, I'm really not sure if we're getting that this year. The eyeshadows are not letting me down. Still very, very easy to blend. I think I'm going to lean into those summery gold warm shades, and I'm going to go in with this shade. I think I'm going to try it on a brush. I did spray my brush just for good measure. I don't normally love a very yellow gold eyeshadow look on myself, but it's fun to try every once in a while, and I definitely think golds are going to be pretty big this summer, especially if you've seen the new Natasha Denona palette that's coming. That looks pretty, but again, I'm pretty sure I've created this exact same look with other NARS palettes that I've had. I think I might take the tiniest bit of this first shade here, which is called Spritz. I might just use that right out here in that outer corner, because I do already kind of have something like that going on. So it's going to give us a bit of that sunset kind of effect. Okay, that's pretty. I actually like how that turned out. I don't think I was expecting to, but I actually do like how that turned out. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. It's definitely giving me like a sunset sort of look, which is definitely very appropriate. Okay, so I actually don't mind at all how that look came together. I'm just going to take a little bit of that highlight. This is called Drift Away, and I'm going to use this on the inner corner. That's quite pretty, actually. Okay, that's pretty. All right, let me pop off camera really quickly. I will pop on some mascara and then I'll be right back to try out these bronzers. So here is the final eye look, and I think it's cute. Nothing unique, nothing I can't get from any of the other NARS palettes, but still a pretty cute look overall. Definitely very warm, a little more yellow gold than I would personally prefer, but that's okay. I did really enjoy how the eyeshadows performed. They blended very well. They blended very easily. I liked that I was able to apply the shadows with a wet brush. I didn't necessarily need my fingers. They are the drier sparkly formula. NARS has a few different shimmer formulas. Some of them are just very smooth, very metallic, but very smooth. And some are a little bit on the chunky side. So these are those more chunky, heavily glittery shimmers. So just keep that in mind. So let's jump into the cheek products. So we do have Laguna 2, Laguna 4, and Drift Away. I typically go for Laguna 1. That is my shade in the powder bronzer as well as the cream bronzer that I love so much. I will pop up a comparison on the screen of all 3 Laguna shades I have, Laguna 1, 2, and 4, so you can see the difference. There really isn't a huge difference between 1 and 2, so I'm not too worried about that. 4 is definitely going to be too deep for me, so I'm probably not going to use that one. So let's just dig into Laguna 2, and I'm just going to lightly dust this on the face. And keep in mind, if you haven't used a NARS bronzer before, I'm sure many of us have, but for those who haven't, this formula does have a bit of a sheen to it. It's not fully matte. It does not have sparkle in it like the Armani bronzer does, but it does have more of a sheen to it, and it's more of a buildable bronzer. It's not so incredibly pigmented that you need to be cautious. I would say Laguna 2, which is what I'm using right now, it's verging on a little bit too deep for me just because I'm so fair. But otherwise, I think it's looking quite nice. And one thing this bronzer does very, very well is blend. So I'm not worried about that. And another thing I do love about these bronzers, particularly the shades, is that if you are overly fair like me, these aren't going to turn you orange. They do have that much more neutral undertone to them. So I think if you are looking for a bronzer with just the right tone, the Laguna bronzers from NARS are still a really, really good formula, and they're not going to turn you orange. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so I do think that is quite nice. I do think that is a really nice bronzer formula. And in keeping with the theme, I am just gonna grab a NARS blush. I'm gonna go into the Orgasm Foreplay Quad. And I'm just gonna grab the original Orgasm blush out of here, just because I feel like that shade will go really nice with the rest of the look. So pretty. That was a good choice. I feel like I'm liking everything else now that I'm getting some color on my face. And going back into the new palette, I'm gonna wipe off the brush I just used for my blush. This is the BK Beauty 112 brush, and I'm just gonna pick up a little bit of that highlight, and I'm just going to sweep it on the cheeks. Okay, it's looking a little bit too... It's definitely a blinding highlight, that is for sure. Can't tell if it's got a bit of a cast, but when I was swatching this palette, I was really loving this shade, so I think this would be one that is beautiful on the eyes. I think that would be beautiful. But I feel like there is a bit of a cast when I look straight forward with this highlight. It's pretty, I just don't know that it's my favorite highlight. I think it is a little bit deeper than I would like for my personal taste. Okay, let me pop on a lip product, take the hair down, and then get into the final comparisons and swatches. So here is the final look. I think it came together pretty well. So let's talk about this palette. I did find quite a few eyeshadow similarities within my NARS palette collection. At first I was tempted to look at the Laguna quads they released last year because I thought this has to be similar based on the packaging, and actually with the eyeshadows they're not that similar, so I didn't bother to swatch these just because there wasn't really a lot of similarities. Same thing with this one. This one is a lot more neutral. I really enjoyed this one, but unless you're comparing to the bronzer and highlight, there really isn't a lot of similarity there either. We did have a few similarities with the Orgasm Rising palette, so I will pop those swatches up. With the eyeshadows, there is definitely quite a few eyeshadow similarities. So again, if you have this one, you're going to be able to create very similar looks that you create with this one. I also grabbed the Endless Nights palette that was released this past holiday. Again, some very similar looks can be created with this one. Not identical, but close. So then I pulled out the Afterglow Irresistible palette, which is their most recent eyeshadow palette. And though not identical, again, you can get some pretty similar eyeshadow looks if you have this one already. And this one is available at Sephora, so if you're interested in this one, I also do have a full review of this one. Actually, I have a full review of all of these, but I do really like this palette. I think it's beautiful. But the palette that I found, I would say the closest similarities was the Summer Unrated palette. So this one was from a few years ago, maybe 2022, maybe 2021. And this is my favorite NARS eyeshadow palette to date. I think it's stunning. This is some of their very best quality that they've ever done. I love this palette. And you can easily recreate the looks from here with this palette. You know, you've got that yellow gold, you've got that more bronzy shade. The mattes are easy to recreate. Very, very easy to recreate looks with this palette using this one. So if you already have this and you have a NARS bronzer that you love, absolutely, I would recommend skipping on this because you really don't need it. I did also compare the highlighters from the Orgasm Foreplay quad with this one, and Orgasm Foreplay is definitely much more golden, and these are a baked formula, whereas the one in the new face palette is more of just a powder. And same with this one, definitely more gold. So this highlight is definitely more champagne, but it's a little deeper than I would personally like on myself, but again, I am super, super fair. So overall, I really like the look that came together with this new Ultimate Laguna face palette. I think it's really pretty. I think it's very easy to use. Going back to my original statement at the beginning, I do wish maybe they would have done 3 or 4 palettes instead of 2, and then had maybe a blush instead of 2 bronzers. I just think it would have added a lot more value to this palette. I think the bronzers are nice to have, but again, I just don't need to. Maybe if there was a light, medium, and deep, I think it would have made more sense rather than just having 2 palettes. The eyeshadows, though very pretty and pulled together a really pretty sunset effect type look, are absolutely nothing unique, especially compared to some of their other eyeshadow palettes. Like I said, if you have the summer unrated, I would absolutely pass on this because you can easily create these eyeshadows. If you have the summer unrated and one of their bronzers, you absolutely just don't need this palette. I would say the same if you have any of their eyeshadow palettes for the most part, because these shades can definitely be found in there. And if you already have a bronzer, then you essentially already have this palette. So as much as I love NARS and I love their formulas and I love their products, I don't think this is worth it. I really don't. I mean, $59 US, $73 Canadian, that's really steep. And again, I wish there was a blush. I wish there was 3 palettes instead of 2. I think that would have made more sense. I think a blush would have made a nice sort of replacement in here. These eyeshadows, beautiful, but nowhere near unique. It's just really not what I wanted from this palette. I don't know what I was expecting. I think when I initially saw it, I just got really excited. There was a new NARS face palette. I was very excited. I tend to love their palettes, their eyeshadows, their face palettes. I do love them. But I think I speak for a lot of us when I say that I wish they would come up with something new and unique, something exciting, maybe a different color story, maybe something not called Laguna or Orgasm, or anything that just isn't this pink and gold color story that they always come out with. I get it, it sells, but I don't love this. I don't think this is worth it. I kind of wish I'd picked up one of the eyeshadow sticks now because I think I might have been a little bit more excited. But overall, I think this palette's nice. I will definitely use it because I have it, and the shade Laguna 1 that I already have is such a little baby mini, so I can see myself reaching for this one more for sure. And Laguna 2 does work for me. I think it'll be a better summer bronzer for me than winter just because it is a little deep. But honestly, at the end of the day, I see myself using these as eyeshadows because they're just so smooth and beautiful when I was swatching them out. I can just definitely see me using these as the eyeshadows and kind of forgetting this top row. I think it's a pretty palette. I don't really think it was necessary, and I really don't think it was worth the price point. If you already have one of their palettes, especially summer unrated or Afterglow Irresistible, you pretty much already have these eyeshadows, and if on top of that you already have one of their bronzers, then you essentially have this palette. And I guarantee you can find a highlighter in your collection that matches this one. So just keep that in mind. For me, this is personally a miss. I like the packaging. I think it's pretty. I do love their products, and the quality is still great. It's just that I don't think this is worth it, and I don't think it's a must-have. If you already shop NARS, you already have these in your collection. And I would also say that if you're still really wanting it, wait for a sale. Just wait for a sale. That's all I would say. So overall, it's good quality. So if you still want to buy it, then I don't think you'll be disappointed. I think you'd really like it. It's just that I don't personally recommend because I don't feel like the value is worth it at the end of the day when it's kind of the same as everything else we already have. So that is it for me today. Let me know your thoughts down below. Were you thinking of buying this one? Did you already? Let me know. I just love to hear from you guys so much. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing before you go. I do upload new videos every single week. Thank you again so very much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!